So today we are diving into the topic of airlines and airports, and we'll be talking about our experiences, but also what airlines and airports could be doing more of, as well as what's already in places. So the good, the bad, the ugly. So Amy, what's your experience been like of special assistance? And also, do you want to explain what special assistance even is?
Yeah, so my experience has been varied, which I think we're going to dive into a lot in this episode with both of our experiences. But special assistance is effectively the assistance that you can get to help you with any extra needs that you have at the airport. So it can be really tailored to you, but there are particular categories that they like to put you in the boxes of because it works on their system. So things like you need help through security and to the gate, you need help up the stairs, that kind of thing. And so it's the special assistance that you will get in order to help you board when you're on board and disembarking the aircraft as well.
I guess also really before we get dive into our personal experiences, we should also talk about booking it because I wasn't aware when I flew Christmas for last that special assistance was even a thing because it was the first time I was flying for my son who's autistic. And it wasn't until we were waiting to board the plane and I was like, oh, why are all these people at the front? You know, they've all got the Sunflower Lanyards on. What's going on? And I later found out from talking to those guys that I could have booked special assistance. So as Amy's just explained, it's the support and help that you get. And to do that, you go on when you're booking your flight, whether that's directly with the airline or a tour operator, and there's usually an option to book special assistance. Now, the tricky part can be finding which option with some airlines is the right code to choose for the special assistance because especially if you're neurodivergent, which my son is, I mean I am as well, but my son's the one that needs the support. And I know from the last flight that I booked, I chose the one that was something to do with no physical disability or something along those lines. And actually it forced me to choose a certain seat and a position on the aircraft. And I was thinking, why does that matter? Maybe it's just because all special assistance needs to be at the back. Okay, fine. So I went along with that. And then before I knew it, I'd confirmed everything, I'd paid. And then I think it was on an email or there was something that came through and it was talking about wheelchair. And I'm thinking, I know for 100% that I chose the right option, but something along the way had gone wrong. And suddenly it's talking about wheelchair access. And I'm thinking, nope, that's not my child. And then that also becomes incredibly difficult because you can't get hold. Well, this was with Ryanair, and trying to get hold of them to even try and change it is an absolute nightmare. So, yes, in theory, you can book special assistance on the website when you're booking your air travel, whether that be through a tour operator or directly with the airline. But you can also phone up and request special assistance, and you can also do it after you've booked the tickets as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a limit to so many hours or days before your flight that you need to put it in if you're doing it online. But if you haven't booked it at all and you're listening to this podcast on your way to the airport, for example, you can still go to the special assistance desk as soon as you arrive and explain to them, and they should be able to help you out in some way, even if it's not the full smooth ish process that it could be if you'd booked it online. And generally speaking, the special assistance desk will be before security. So it's like you go there as one of the first things that you do when you get to an airport. In terms of the different types of assistance that you get and what that actually looks like, I think it does vary. And I know more so from the code that I choose for me. So if you haven't heard our previous episodes where we've spoken about our own health, just a really brief kind of overview is that I have a few physical disabilities that affect my joints. And that means that part-time I use a wheelchair, but most of the time I'm okay. But things like in airports where there are long queues and I'm standing for a long time and my pain is like just sky high from standing for so long, and if I'm walking a long distance, and we know that airports, you can walk for miles and miles and miles to get to some of those gates, especially the ones that are really far away. So what I do is I book the wheelchair code that Louisa was just talking about. I think it's something like WHCR or something. So it's like wheelchair contracted. And what that does is when you arrive at the airport, you're able to use a wheelchair if you want to. If you're on your own, someone will push you. If you have someone with you who can push you, then you can be a bit more independent. And I always favour that if I can, because the experiences I've had sometimes where they just whoosh you through and then you're just at the gate like twiddling your thumbs waiting for your flight is a bit frustrating. So you kind of can then go through security. They take you through a different lane. You get yourself sorted, and then if you've got your own, like you borrowed one of their wheelchairs and somebody else is taking you, then you can do your usual shopping. You can park up. If you're in Gatwick, you have a whole quiet special assistance zone, which is really great for more than just physical needs. Like that's great for sensory overwhelm and stuff. And then depending on the airport, either you'll go in your wheelchair to the gate, or again, Gatwick, they'll put you in one of the like little truck things that go indoors, and they make a really funny sound that's a bit like a reversing truck, and you go through like the crowds in this kind of like vehicle, and then they take you through the back of the airport, and it's quite interesting sometimes seeing through the different lifts in the back of the airport, and then they'll get you to the gate. And at that point you've got different choices. So for physical disabilities, they might help you just by getting you literally to the bottom of the steps, and then you can take yourself up the steps. Generally, like what Louisa was just saying, they'll put special assistance people first. And that means that we board earlier. And that's not to give us some special perk. That's because if we're stood waiting for everybody else to sit down, that can be really painful. We might hold other people up by sorting out our bags more slowly and stuff. So they get us on and sit us down, and then we're out of the way and we've had the space we need and everyone else can get on board. The other thing is they might help you up the stairs. So you could have, there's like a vehicle that they might drive you to the plane in, and then it goes up like a, what's the thing called? Like a cherry picker, is it called? The like,
Yeah, I know
and
what
it
you
goes
mean.
up. So it's sort of like that, but like the truck goes straight up, and then that attaches to the door of the aircraft, and then you can just walk straight out or wheel straight out. And then they also have like specially adapted wheelchairs that are thin enough to go through the gap, because of course the gap in an aircraft is really small compared to the width of a wheelchair. And so for people that need help, they'll put them in that and take them down. So there's varying levels for physical disabilities that you can choose in terms of the assistance that you get. And then also depending on whether you're on your own or with somebody who is effectively your carer who's there to help you. I don't know if you've noticed any other like types of special assistance than those ones.
Well, I was just thinking as you were talking about like the communication aspects, and it's like once I realized that I could book special assistance, obviously we exchanged numerous voice notes about special assistance and how it works and stuff, which was really, really useful. We had varying experiences, and there was an occasion where in one place we got rushed through the airport. And for my son, it's always better to get there quite a few hours beforehand so that we can kind of like just help regulate and all the rest of it. We got taken directly from special assistance desk directly to the gate, and we wanted to get food. And there was no listening to that. It was no, we're getting you from A to B. Great. Luckily, I have travel games with me everywhere, even just for a day trip. So that sort of helped, but not in terms of food. And obviously, sometimes you're limited on what you've got in your bags and stuff. So I think the communication, and I think especially when you don't have a physical disability, but you've got other types of disabilities, I think a lot could be done to improve that, because it's extremely frustrating. There's that presumption always that if you've requested special assistance, it's because you've got physical needs, when actually that's not the case. The last time that we flew, they ignored the fact that we had booked special assistance. They were saying, well, you need to pay if you want to go in the priority booking lane. I'm like, I'm not fussed. We'll happily wait till the end of the plane. I'm just saying, hey, we're here. We're going to wait here because my son could have a huge meltdown. You don't want to be dealing with that, and there is that lack of consideration and appreciation for what families go through or adults go through. And that's where a lot of my frustrations come through. I think the idea of special assistance is great, but I feel like a lot more work can be done. So whereas you've been rushed through because of the physical aspect, sometimes we have, and other times we've just been ignored and then having to queue. And then my son will start to get sensory overload, overheat, wants to leave the lines, all the rest of it, gets incredibly stressed out. And there's just an ignorance there for his needs. And it's not that he's a naughty child, because he really isn't. It's all down to that sensory stuff. So I think there's a lot that could be done to improve. And I think what I've learned from it is possibly in future, if I can, I will be contacting places to kind of say, hey, just to let you know, my son is autistic. What do we need to do? Because the experiences thus far have been too indifferent, not necessarily on the positive side either. And it's not a case about booking priority booking either, because I know there's often a lot in the media about families that have got kids with that are neurodivergent and how it's just about getting the best benefits and all this sort of stuff. For me, it's more about understanding than anything else. Fine, I'm happy to pay, but it's that seems to be missing. But have you found that there's been a big difference between the UK and overseas with
Yeah, I
special assistance?
found there's been differences even between UK airports,
Yeah,
but also UK
me
and
too.
overseas. And it does come back to that thing around communication and planning and whose job it is. So I'm trying to think where we were flying back from. It was a European country. And I was with my sister and we'd booked special assistance. And I kind of have this running theme of I know what I'm getting in the UK and I know what I can push for. So, for example, if they're trying to wheel me through too quickly, I can put my foot down and say with absolute certainty, you do not have to push me through this quickly. I need to get some food. But I only know that through all of the bad
Yeah,
experiences. So now I know what I get in the UK and what I can push for. But abroad, it's harder because of the language barrier, but also harder because you don't know what their normal process is. So we were flying back from somewhere in Europe and they'd sat us by not even yet through baggage or through security. And they just said, well, you need to go and sit in that chair and you need to phone special assistance through the phone. And so I did. And then they said, and now you just wait. And we waited and we waited and we waited. And our flight was about an hour away, at which point we're starting to panic because we've still got to get through security. We've still got to get to the gate. We were hoping to get some food once we got through, like all of these things. And as much as like I mentioned food and stuff, that's also a really important thing for like regulating your body and staying on routine. And I get really high and low blood sugar, kind of like headaches and stuff if I haven't eaten. And so we do need to, like, we're still people who need to eat. And so we're thinking about all that stuff. And they said, oh, yeah, that's fine. You can come through security. So they took us through security. No wheelchair at this point, no offer of one. I look young, so therefore I don't need one. And then they took us through this small security queue. Sit down. Right, okay, sat down, waiting and waiting and waiting. And then finally, some special assistants come. And there are several older people who are like pensioner age who have arrived since me and my sister have sat down, who get taken one at a time until I had to make a bit of noise and be like, excuse me, like our flight's really soon now. Like, can you take us, please? Like, I know that we look young, but I have booked special assistance, do require it. And they were not very like happy with me, but they took me anyway. And they took me all the way to the gate, even though I had been insisting, we need to get some food, we need to get some food. Parked me up at the gate. Because I was with my sister, she ran to a vending machine because obviously once you've got so far, there's only like vending machines available. Got some food. And then the lady who checked us in on board, she was like, oh, like, what's gone on? Because by then I was in a wheelchair. She was like, oh, have you hurt yourself? And she'd automatically assumed that I'd got an injury rather than a disability. And I was like, oh, no, it's like a disability. And then I just burst into tears. And she helped me and my sister, and she was so lovely. And this was an EasyJet member of staff. And she helped us on board first. She changed our seats and she said, we're not a full flight, so I've given you an entire row to yourselves so that you two can have the space. And I'm going to write down word for word what like your account is of what happened. And then I'm going to put the complaint in. And she did that on our behalf. And I've kind of gone off on a slight tangent here, but it's, I think, a really great thing to mention. I then flew to Spain not long after, maybe a year or two later. And the same member of staff was on board and remembered me
no.
and came over and said hello and made sure that all of my needs were sorted. And so that's one of those really positive experiences where it was rubbish in the other country that we were flying home from. But the EasyJet staff had been trained, like, even though there was that slight negative where she'd assumed that it was an injury and not a disability, as soon as I'd been open about it and spoken about it, she just helped and then she remembered me. And it's that, like, it's those things that go a long way. It's the people. So, yeah, it does vary. It can be really rubbish, but you can also have some really great experiences from people just caring.
It's incredible, isn't it? Just the difference that a person can make or break an experience. And as you say, there is that misinterpretation maybe about what your needs are based on your age and all this sort of stuff. But, it shouldn't be about that. It's not just that you get to a certain age and then you've got health issues or disabilities. It can be from birth. So there should be more understanding and empathy around it.
Yeah.
So How do you find, in terms of thinking about the airports themselves, how do you feel about the sensory environments? Like, so with that, I'm talking about sound, smells, too hot, too cold, etc. Like, how do you find them?
So I actually don't find it too bad, but I think that's because I know like my techniques that I need.
Yeah.
And so I'll find somewhere quieter to sit, and I'll make sure that I have food that like I know and like, and not something new and different and like everything changing all at once. Gatwick, they have like a zone, and I find that zone really helpful. So sometimes I do travel with someone who has autism and they find the sensory overload way bigger and more challenging than I do. And so that's really helpful to have that special assistance zone that's kind of quieter, it's tucked in the corner, it's away from the main hall. There's space in Stansted that's downstairs as well, where you can go for additional seating that's a little bit quieter. And in Gatwick, like you can order your Weatherspoons to the special assistance area, which is really handy for just being able to be in that calmer space. What about you with like your travel and how you found it with the sensory stuff?
For me, I think it comes down to the fact that I'm so used to having to be 5 steps ahead of my child. Not literally, but in terms of like the what his needs are and how he struggles. So he can't regulate his temperature. So he's either really hot or really cold. And like as soon as he goes, I'm hot, it's like he just wants to strip off almost immediately. So I'm quite aware of that. I'm also aware of like where we'll sit. So we will kind of go to the special assistance areas once we're through security, or we'll try and find a quieter spot somewhere. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I think Manchester Airport has created special areas, but not necessarily, but only on some of their terminals. So not on the ones that we've flown from, or if they have, we haven't found them. I think sometimes that could be improved in terms of the signage and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a tricky one because we've got opposing sensory challenges, should we say. So what works for him doesn't necessarily work for me and vice versa. And it's having that quiet enough space, but also what I find with the like special assistance zones, at least the ones we've been to in Manchester and Stansted when I've known about them, is they're always quite small, and then suddenly you'll get a load of people that all want to sit there. And again, there's that look of, well, clearly they don't need special assistance. So why are they sort of here? And they're always in like a weird sort of shape. So it almost feels like you're sitting on top of one another. And I might go and get my some food just so I can sit there and kind of eat it nice and quietly. But yeah, it's again people taking their foods. And then the smells can be really strong. Sometimes the toilets aren't always that close either to the special assistance areas, or the sensory areas. So I think there's still a long way to go in terms of how airports could be improved. And again, recognition of hidden disabilities versus physical disabilities and obvious disabilities.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And just that, like that awareness and keep making sure staff are trained up and knowing the difference in all of those things. And that's something that we've both found really good in Denmark because they recognize the Sunflower Lanyard. They had a whole different like queue system that was just if you have the lanyard or if you have forgotten your lanyard but you need to be in this queue, then come into this queue. And they were just really helpful and smiley, and it was like they were enjoying their jobs and they were happy to help you and not like, oh, this is my job, I have to help you. So that's been a really good experience. And I think because I did the Christmas markets in Copenhagen, and so I was limited by the tourism side of things that I saw. But I think you were saying that you noticed that went even further than the airport. So it's like a countrywide thing.
Yeah, 100%. And if anyone doesn't know and not heard any of our episodes, but Sunflower Lanyard is to basically highlight that you've got a disability, whether that's a hidden disability or not. I think it's predominantly for hidden disabilities, but you could still wear it anyway, whatever makes you feel comfortable. But yeah, in Denmark, like all the attractions are advertising it, which is absolutely amazing. And it makes you feel seen and heard. And I think that's so important. I think that going back to the airport stuff in the UK, often like we'll get pushed into the family kind of lanes again, which is fine. But there's that lack of understanding that actually there might be more to it than it just being a family sort of thing. The looks can be not just from other travelers, but from staff themselves. But then, I guess you can kind of understand it. You see so many people sometimes with sunflower lanyards, and I must admit, sometimes you do sort of think, I wonder like how many of these people actually do need the additional support. I'm autistic. I suspect I've got ADHD. I don't wear a sunflower lanyard. I've traveled around the world. I've never had special assistance for me. So I would never even dream of using a sunflower lanyard. Whereas for my son, that's a whole different topic. He absolutely needs that additional support. So yeah, I think that's also quite tricky and possibly what makes other travelers wary about whether people actually need it, especially when it is a hidden disability.
Yeah, and we're going to do a whole other episode where we cover things like the access card and that being different, because with the sunflower lanyard you can just wear it, but with something like the access card you have to provide proof and then get that card, which can, like, just all of these things help, whether it's the sunflower lanyard or the access card and staff training. Like, I think I'm probably across all of our episodes going to come back to that thing about like just training up staff to know, and having staff that know like other people's lived experiences because they've taken the time to listen and that sort of thing, it just makes the world of difference. Just like learning to listen and hear those needs. And it comes back to, can have all of the special assistance processes and systems set up in the world, but every single person is different. We talk about this where if you've met somebody with autism, you've met one person with autism. If you've met somebody with a physical disability like fibromyalgia or like an amputated leg, for example, you've met one person. Like, you haven't met everybody and you don't know all of the needs. So yeah, that stuff is really key for me. It's just that people know and take the time to listen and understand. And I guess that's why we started this podcast, is to open up that conversation and like invite that conversation to take place and happen.
100%, 100%, because it's about raising awareness and education. And that is such a critical piece for me. It's also, everything you've been saying, plus the empathy aspect as well. Because you can have the training, but actually, if you're just doing the training because actually you've got to, it's part of your job, and you don't actually care about it, dare I say it, then you're not going to buy into it. You're not going to recognize it, which is where sometimes speaking to others or like listen to our podcast where we're sharing our experiences and having guests on to talk about their experiences, we're trying to raise awareness. That's the reason we're doing this podcast. So you've touched upon your boarding experience, where it's been like a bit of a mixed bag, but you also had the amazing support on board. I think that from my experiences of flights, there again, even when we've booked special assistance, we've landed somewhere and it's like, hi, we've got special assistance. There is still that look of, and so what? So what? If what do you think could be done to sort of change that? Like what would you like to see change?
Staff training. Um, no, I think it is that judgment thing. And like, I have had very similar things where I'm disembarking and they have assumed by doing a quick scan of who's left on the plane that there's only two people who need special assistance. And so they've sent my wheelchair away. And then I've got off the plane and they're like, oh, we didn't realise the last special assistance person was still here. Oh, we'll go chase after and get your wheelchair back. I'm like, why did you send it away in the first place? Like, it doesn't take 5 minutes to wait for me to get off the plane. So I think that thing of like just not casting judgment over, you look young, you look healthy, you look fine. I quite often say the better I look, the worse I feel. So today, for example, I look like I've put effort in. I've got my hair up, I've put my makeup on, but I feel really, really shattered and tired. And so I've put extra effort in to cover up the fact that I feel shattered and tired so I don't look it. So, like, when you're out and about, the better you look, sometimes the worse you feel. And I know that's hard then because we're sort of hiding it. But why should we have to look poorly for us to be taken at face value for the fact that we have a disability?
It's the irony, isn't it? Like both of us are absolutely exhausted. I'm doing my very best at the moment to not yawn.
Yeah.
And it's just part of what we do. It's not so much that we're masking as such, but it just comes back to you don't know how someone really feels inside. And so those judgments that are made just, yeah, it's infuriating. In terms of accessibility, and obviously your mum has used a wheelchair, you've talked about your wheelchair experiences, but from a actual like transportation and accessible toilets and stuff, what's been your experience of being like when you traveled with your mum, for example?
Yeah, so there are loads of accessible toilets around the airports from my experience. Um, Being somebody that does get pushed through an airport by a friend, they're able to like wheel me into the disabled loo, and then we're not leaving stuff outside and getting worried that the wheelchair's going to be like tidied up or whatever. Or when I've been with my mum, the same thing. So there are accessible toilets. That's and even up to the boarding gates, I've noticed it's really handy that there are toilets right by the boarding gates as well, especially if you get taken all the way there sooner than you want to be there. So that's been really great. Some of the stuff that's not so fab when you travel with your own wheelchair is you just don't know the condition that you're going to like find your wheelchair in when you come and pick it up at the end. So what they'll do is they'll check it, and either they'll like check it completely with baggage and stuff straight away, or when you get to the plane. And that always feels a little bit stressful because you're just leaving it with its luggage tag next to the plane and hoping that somebody does their job and makes sure it gets on the plane. But we've had an experience the other side where then we've landed back in the UK and the wheelchair's been taken off and then it's just been left there. And we've spent hours like going back and forth to various different people, like the oversized baggage desk, and going, was it oversized baggage? Is that the problem? Like, is it with you? And they, oh no, that's not our problem. You need to ask special assistants. And then special assistants go, well, it's not with us and it's with luggage. And then luggage say, well, it's not with us, it's with oversized. And we went between all of these people, and we were very persistent because we could not go anywhere without mum's mobility aid, until somebody had overheard the conversation. Wasn't their job at all, but they had access to go where the plane had pulled in, and they found it over an hour later sitting as if it had just been taken off the plane. The plane had then gone and flown off to its next destination, and it was still sat there on the tarmac. And he brought it in, and it was like the most helpful thing ever. But he went, do you know, this also wasn't my job, but I absolutely could not stand to see you being ignored by every single person. So I went and made sure it happened. And that's like, I've never heard a horror story like that where your wheelchair just gets left behind. So don't panic if you're listening to this and you've got a wheelchair to take. Just be aware of that kind of thing. And just know that you absolutely do put your foot down to make sure that you get your wheelchair back, and can carry on with the journey.
Yeah. What a start or end to your holiday.
Yeah.
What a nightmare. I mean, no wheelchair experience, but the only time I flew with a pram, again, like the communication was just so sporadic and hit and miss. But in the end, I think I ended up buying a special bag to put it in so that I knew that it would not get damaged. Well, trying to prevent it from being damaged, but then also hopefully it would get put to a certain part. But there's just, yeah, it's too unpredictable. And I get it. Everyone's got their own roles and they're probably tightly timed on what they're doing and all the rest of it. But actually, you've got the customer experience to consider. And, you know, I'm sure we'll talk a lot about customer experience because I think that's so often undervalued and yet it means so much to people.
Yeah, definitely. And it comes back again to that one person can make or break how the experience has been for you, in just the way that they are like having empathy and being caring and treating you like a human being and listening to what you need. And so all of this stuff, as much as we talk about some stuff that sounds quite negative, is to shine a light on what's going on in a way where it can be improved. There are absolutely actionable things that can happen there where that can be improved and the experience can be improved for everybody.
Which leads us nicely on to our question for podcast guests that we're also doing within our episodes as well is, so if a magic wand could be waved, what would be the one thing that you would change to improve air travel accessibility, whether that be for an airport or an airline?
That's a really good question. I think for me, it would be a personalized approach to booking your special assistants. So rather than what box do you fit in best? And then once you get to the airport, it's you go through the process that's been assigned to that tick box that you have ticked, instead being a personal experience of you've shared your needs in more than just one tick box. And then when you check in, they read that and they make sure that you're put on the right sort of pathway that's a bit more personalized than just, you ticked this box, so we're going to get you from A to B and we're going to leave you there hungry. Like, yeah, I think that would be my thing. And with my AI hat on, because I have done a lot of research and exploration into AI, that's also like really possible now with AI, because you could put your information about what you need and it could sift through that to create some processes that are really personalized, that don't take staff time, and we're not asking for something that's really extra expensive. So as much as it's a magic wand and it could be expensive, I think that's what I'd go for. What about you?
I would probably say greater recognition and appreciation for the non-physical disabilities, because going to choose those options for special assistance, I look at them and think none of them are quite right. There's no opportunity to say, kind of similar to what you're saying, really, but there's no opportunity to kind of say, okay, yeah, I think I want to say it's something along the lines of brain development or mental or something like that. That is the option to choose. And it's like, yeah, okay, it'd be really useful to be able to say, this is the support that's actually needed. So a bit like if I book a table at a restaurant, I always put, my son's autistic, please can we sit in a quieter spot? So to be able to kind of book the right option for being neurodivergent, sensory challenges, either first on the plane, last on the plane, don't mind which, but just so that it's a smooth transition um, from that part, but then actually going through the airport in terms of passport control. And this isn't because I want to go, hey, I can go through passport security for you. It's literally he cannot cope. He cannot wait, we have got medical things confirming house stress and everything else and the impact on him. So just being able to kind of say actually what the requirements are would make a massive difference, because you said earlier, each need is different per person.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there is a massive like box missing, even if they keep a tick box process, to just be able to have a box about neurodivergent, like, and be able to tick that is a way bigger step forward than like where we are now. So just thinking then in terms of people who have listened to this podcast, like what key takeaways, what do we think is the thing? Like, if you can take anything away from this podcast, what would we like them to take away?
Special assistance is available.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds like, I know we've spoken a lot about special assistance, but like I said, when we flew to Lapland the Christmas before last, didn't know it was a thing.
Yeah.
No idea about it. So yeah, for me, it would be special assistance is available, and it's not just for people that have got physical disabilities.
Yeah, 100%. Mine would be exactly the same, that look out for it in your booking process, do some research around it if it's something that you think you'll need, and give special assistance a go, and like just know that it exists. It might be a bit of trial and error until you know what you need, like personally versus what they can offer. But once you hit that sweet spot, it does make traveling so much more accessible for you, so that you can enjoy your onward journey instead of start tired and exhausted and overwhelmed and everything else that the experience could have given you without that special assistant.
And it's funny because we're talking about special assistance. I'm going to be sailing at some point, and last year I booked it, and I'm thinking, I don't think I've actually contacted them, because if you sail, it's a different process again. But I want to let them know that my son's autistic, blah, 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 because I haven't actually done that yet.
Yeah, it goes so much further than airlines. Like today's episode was completely focused on airports and airlines, but the Eurostar, you can book it, and yeah, all kinds of things. Just be really aware of your cut-off time for anybody listening that wants to book special assistance. I think airports allow it a lot closer, but then you might need to give more notice if it's something like Eurostar and sailing and that kind of thing. But know that it exists if you need to use it, because it can be really helpful.
100%, 100%. And we would love to hear your stories. Obviously we're sharing, hopefully, like we say, raising awareness, educating, but we want to hear your stories, the good, the bad, the ugly, because we will then share them with other people. We might either do a blog or just add them in our show notes, or however it might be, or maybe you want to be a guest in a future episode, then do get in touch. And we'd love to hear from you. And also, if there's something that you sort of think, oh, actually, this would be a really good topic to cover, again, we'd love to hear from you, because as part of our podcast, we are chatting to guests about their personal experiences, but we're also talking to professionals as well. So yeah, do get in touch with us.
And we will see you in the next episode.
See you then.
Thanks so much for listening. I'm Amy Walters, brand and design expert. Our aim is to make tourism work for everyone, powered by lived experience and expertise.
And I'm Louisa van Vessem, a consultant, mentor, and facilitator. And together, we help tourism businesses build inclusive strategy and design that actually works.
You can find us online at Inclusive Tourism on Instagram and LinkedIn, and check out the show notes to connect with us.
See you soon.